politics is getting uncomfortably personal with some politicians in this debate about the Morrison government's plan to introduce a cashless welfare card that can't be spent by the unemployed on drugs and drink. Here is Senator Jackie Lambie yesterday saying why she's for it.
And I'll be honest about this, I started to get an alcohol problem in that last couple of years when I was on welfare. Had I been on that welfare card and I look back, I mean, there might have only been $5 or $6 bottles of wine, but I can tell you, if I'd have been 20/80 and 20% cash, I would have halved that drinking, I can assure you right now. So, and then that ran into problems for me after a couple of years and ended up trying to take my life.
I'll be glad she got out of that hole and is now passing laws on the government of Australia. But today, Senator Pauline Hanson, who shares the balance of power in the Senate with Jackie Lambie, attacked Lambie for refusing to the government's plan to agree to it for drug tests people on the dole. Lambie says she's refusing drug tests for the unemployed until the government builds more drug treatment centres.
Yes, you kindly please explain for it, because her child has been on drugs and you would knock back something that could possibly help, people like her son, and that's why I'm supporting this.
Well, Parliament. Joining me is the panel, Liberal Senator James Patterson, Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching. Kimberley, why is Labor also against drug testing of people on the dole?
Well, I think what we saw on Sunday when the Minister, Anne Ruston, was interviewed, she said, well, we don't have the statistics in yet. We don't know how many people have come off New Start because of this, because obviously this card is already being trialled in several areas. So we don't really have any of the statistics. I think the Prime Minister himself was also, we'll just see what's going to happen with this when he was on 7:30 last night. I mean, this is really, though, Andrew, a weapon of mass distraction by the Liberal Party, because what they don't want to talk about is the economy and the fact that our economy is slowing, wages are stagnant. This is a little bit of red meat that they're throwing out.
James, why is Kimberley wrong?
Andrew, I can tell you why the Labor Party is not supporting our trial of drug testing for welfare recipients, and that is because the Labor Party has long since ceased to be the party of the workers, and they are now the party of welfare. And they're much more interested in defending people's access to welfare, including their right to spend that welfare on drugs, rather than helping those people on welfare get off drugs and get into work. You cannot turn up for a job interview high on ice and expect it to go well. What the government is doing is establishing a trial to see if we can help these people get off drugs and have a better life.
Kimberley, I think can I just point out?
On that? Yes.
No, I just want to put something to you. A lot of the debate is, oh, well, look, it won't work, or it might not work, or we haven't got the evidence that it will work, OK? So it's from the point of view of the unemployed. Can I put to you that a lot of Australians actually don't want to be paying their taxes to the unemployed if it's going to go on drugs and booze? Whether this plan works or not, they just don't want to give their money. Is it fair for them to be concerned about this legislation from that point of view?
And I think that our taxes should be spent as efficiently and as effectively as possible. But what I would say to you, Andrew, the largest cohort of New Start recipients are women in their 50s who are single mums. That's the largest cohort. So if we are going to say to people, well, actually, we think we're going to, drug test you, whether that's by saliva or blood test, I mean, it's a pretty, how much is that going to cost in order to actually ascertain how many of these people are taking certain types of drugs?
I know, it's probably going to cost a lot less than drug testing all sorts of innocent people on our roads to catch the minority that offend. We do drug testing already. James, look, yes, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say there are people in their 50s, probably people on New Start who voted, who are the Prime Minister's quiet Australians, and I'm pretty sure that they won't really appreciate they're on New Start. They don't want to be on New Start. These are women in their 50s.
No, I know that. I know that.
Cohort of recipients.
No, but I know that. I know that. James, your turn.
Unlikely to be, drug users.
Andrew, as you point out, if you're driving a car and you get breathalyzed and drug tested, you are not exempt because of your gender and you are not exempt because of your age. If you work on a mine site and you are randomly drug tested to make sure that you're safe on that site, you're not exempted because of your age, and then you're not exempted because of your gender. This is a ridiculous red herring that the Labor Party is using to distract from the fact that they are unwilling to support a trial in 3 areas affecting 5,000 people to see if we can help people who are dependent on drugs get off drugs and into work. This is a compassionate thing to do to help improve the lives of people in our society who desperately need help.
Kimberley, I just had an interview with Gladys Liu, the Liberal MP that's accused of links too close to China. I don't know that it went well with her. I saw some text saying, well, I was mean because I shouldn't ask an MP if the president of China is a dictator, because no MP wants to offend China. It's not a diplomatic thing to do. So just to test how unfair I was, can I ask you whether you think the Chinese president is indeed what he is, a dictator?
I think he has given to himself power for life. And of course, what we have seen is a return to a one-person rule in China. I mean, obviously in the past there had been collective power, through their systems in the CCP. That has now been diminished. And of course, what we have also seen in China is a lot of people who might be competitors or potential successors to President Xi. They are on corruption charges. It's very difficult to ascertain, given that their legal system is very different.
A dictator then? I think you've given the definition of dictator. Would you go as far as to call him a dictator?
It is an authoritarian regime, and we can only hope that, I am a strong defender of democratic principles and democratic ideals, and I think that What's
the problem of calling him a dictator? A dictator is a dictator. I mean, what's the problem of calling him that? I mean, he's unelected. He's made himself president for life. He locks up his opponents. Dictator.
Well, and I think that what we are seeing, we have with China, I think we are seeing a very authoritarian regime, as we see in Russia, and as we are seeing increasingly in some jurisdictions around the world. I mean, if you go into Latin America, you're seeing, obviously...
There seems to be a nervousness about calling a spade a spade. James Patterson, is Xi Jinping a dictator?
Well, Andrew, he certainly wasn't elected by any democratic system that any Australian would recognise. There are no opposition parties in China that contest elections. There's no universal franchise where people can express their views. So if you want to use that term, Andrew, I'm certainly not going to argue with you about it.
Did you see the interview with Gladys Liu?
No, I was actually celebrating the maiden speech of my new colleague, Senator David Van from Victoria. So
lucky
I heard some
man.
References to it, but I didn't watch it.
Do you have any concerns about her links to Communist China?
In my conversations with Gladys, she's always spoken to me passionately about how she supports freedom and democracy, and she explained to me that's why she chose to come to Australia, and that's why she chose to join the Liberal Party and run for office in our democratic system. I think
no concerns at all.
We've woken up. Well, I was just going to say, Andrew, I think very wisely we've woken up in the last 2 years in Australia to some complacency in the political class about foreign interference, including from China, and we are hypersensitive to it, and all of us are going to be held to a higher standard than we ever were before, certainly in a pre-Sam Dastyari world, and that's what we all accept when we put our hands up for office. No concern at all? Well, I didn't say that, Andrew. I just said that we're going to all be held to a high standard, and that's appropriate.
Kimberley, you had Sam Dastyari. Do you think Gladys Liu might turn out to be the Liberal Sam Dastyari?
I think that Gladys Liu is a walking time bomb for the Liberal Party. I mean, the Herald Sun and the ABC have reported extensively on Gladys Liu. I would say there is more to come about her. Obviously, more than $300,000 in donations had to be returned, because they were from sources that the Liberal Party wasn't happy.
She denies that. Well, so we'll have to see what more comes out.
I point out, Andrew, that when Liberal Party politicians receive donations that they were uncomfortable with, for example, Andrew Hastie, they return them. In the Labor Party, they accept them in oldie bags and then disguise them as donations from others.
Whoa, well, that was sad. That was a pretty obvious one, but well-deserved, I guess. But listen, Kimberley, before we run out of time, so you're just back from a trip to Afghanistan, which is why you weren't here and why we couldn't tell people that why you weren't here. How do you think it's going? Like, it's now, 18 years since Australia joined America in toppling the Taliban that had, was used Afghanistan as a launching pad for, obviously, the 9/11 attacks. We toppled that, and we've been engaged since in trying to build a democracy. You've been there. What did you see?
Well, actually, I went with Andrew Wallace, the member for Fisher, who represented the government. I represented the opposition, and we went to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Afghan-Australian relations. It's very important for countries like Afghanistan to have diplomatic relations with other countries. I think that President Ghani it's a very contested space, and there's a lot of politicians there who are very concerned about Pakistan's influence. Pakistan, of course, that nurtures a lot of terrorist activity. And I think what we've seen recently with President Trump's, the possibility that there would be peace talks and peace with the Taliban, I think that's going to be very difficult. The Taliban has said that it wouldn't accept the constitution. But I also think that we know that probably not all of the Taliban leadership is not able to speak for all of the Taliban. And there's an estimate that 30 to 50% of the Taliban might go to ISIS in Khorasan province.
Well,
and that would be incredibly
freaky.
Problematic.
Yeah. Problematic is one of those weird words that actually mean that's as scary as hell.
Well, disaster.
James, yes. Before we go, should Australia stay the distance in helping Afghanistan, or is 18 years long enough?
I'm very proud of our contribution to Afghanistan, and like Kimberley, I've visited our troops over there and see the real difference that they're making on the ground, particularly in the training of the Afghan National Army. I think we've got a moral obligation to help support Afghanistan in any way we can to keep at bay the dangerous terrorist elements like the Taliban and others, and to support them as much as we can in their transition to a stronger and more vibrant democracy, and I hope we continue to do so.
OK, Kimberley Kitching and James Patterson, thank you both so much for your time. Appreciate it.